Star Trek, The Next Generation, The Best and the Brightest, Chapter 1, First Year, 2368 to 69. Jamie took the stair lift 2 steps at a time, but the antique monorail let out a melodious chime, announcing the closing of the doors. Using the guardrail's support, she propelled herself onto the platform as the monorail began to silently slide away from the Academy station. It was nearly midnight, so there were no people on the platform, and few were inside the monorail. Jamie ran alongside the train, nearing the edge of the platform, unable to stop and give up. She could see Elma sitting on the side, her head held high and her back stiff, unable to relax and lean back even in the empty passenger compartment. Jamie could also see her own tricorder in Elma's hand. She scrabbled to get hold of the monorail, but its smooth modular design gave her no purchase. As it began to pick up speed, Jamie lunged desperately at the rear of the last car. One of her booted feet got purchase on the small brake box protruding right over the rail. Her fingers strained to hang on to the groove of the rear window, and she realized she had made a very bad mistake. She was wearing the new waffle-cut style shoes instead of her regulation Starfleet issue boots. As the monorail pulled out of the Academy station, heading into San Francisco and parts unknown, along with Elma and the tricorder, Jamie's foot slid off the brake box. Jamie hit the rail with a solid oof, tried to grab on. The double rail was about a meter wide, and her arms could barely get around it. As her legs went over, she had nothing to grab hold of. She hung for a second by one elbow and almost stuck her hand into the tempting grooves on the side of the rail. Anyone else would have, but Jamie's trained engineering reflexes made her jerk away from the highly charged conduit. She had just enough time to congratulate herself on her own wisdom before she fell. It flashed through her mind during the 12-meter drop that it was her own fault if she got killed. Then she hit something solid, but not solid, sending a tingling energy shockwave through her body as her stomach seemed to keep on falling. She let herself go limp, knowing better than to resist a force field. All she could see beneath her were the orange, gaping mouths of Hibernian tulips, freshly planted and protected from dimwits like her by a force field bubble. She slid off the side of the bubble, head first into the grass. Rubbing her head, Jamie groaned at the rips in her cadet uniform. One sleeve was hanging by a few threads, looking exactly the way the pulled muscle in her shoulder felt. Next to her, the blue residue of ionization crackled over the flowers before the force field became invisible again. At least it was the dead of night, so there wasn't a crowd gathering around. Jamie knew she should feel lucky at her narrow escape. The cobblestone pathway was 2 paces away, but she was upset about Elma getting away. Where was Elma taking her tricorder? She knew her roommate had taken it before, but the temporary memory of the tricorder was always erased after Elma used it, so Jamie had been watching her carefully for several weeks to catch her in the act. She pulled a small device from the roomy trouser pocket of her cadet uniform. With a few keystrokes, she activated the homing beacon she had recently planted inside the tricorder, and a map appeared on the tiny holoscreen. A green blip appeared, moving slowly across the grid as a centuries-old monorail system carried Elma east of the Presidio into San Francisco. Jamie glanced around, looking for the Golden Gate Bridge to orient herself. The graceful span of the bridge was visible from almost everywhere on the Academy grounds. "That was pretty impressive," a voice said right behind her. The homing map flew into the air as Jamie startled. If it wasn't for the force field, she would have crushed the tulips a second time. Her hands clutched at her chest, staring at the intruder, her heart beating faster than it had from the fall. "Who are you?" A woman stepped forward, letting the light of the monorail tower fall on her smooth, dark skin. For a moment, from the strange shape of her head, Jamie thought it was an alien she'd never seen before, and she had seen more than most. Then she realized the woman was wearing an odd, bulbous hat made of some kind of plushy maroon material. "I'm Guinan, and who are you?" "Cadet Jamie Miranda," she replied, straightening her uniform. She ignored the hanging rags of her black sleeve as she tried to regain her dignity. "You're not Starfleet, are you?" Not exactly. I'm the bartender on the Enterprise. The bartender? Jamie repeated incredulously. Guinan stooped and picked up the homing map, considering it. You know, on Earth, electronic eavesdropping is illegal. It's my own tricorder, Jamie quickly defended herself. My roommate took it. One smooth brow lifted, slightly incredulous. Your roommate stole your tricorder. Is that why you almost killed yourself? Jamie wasn't about to mention the extra gadgets it had taken months to jury-rig into that tricorder. It's more than that. Elma's a member of my quad. She's my roommate. We're responsible for each other. Guinan's eyes narrowed slightly, as if considering the well-known Starfleet policy that made a unit out of the 8 cadets living on each floor of the dormitory towers. The quads were often a cadet's first taste of what it took to be a team. If a cadet got in bad enough trouble, the members of their quad were questioned, and if negligence was found, then they were disciplined as well. Overhead, a monorail chimed as it pulled into the tower station. Voices emerged from the cars, and a few cadets descended the stairlift on the other side of the station, disappearing toward the quads. The hum of the white monorail, as it smoothly passed by overhead, wasn't loud, but Guinan watched it with interest as if she had never seen anything like it before. Jamie decided to take the offensive. What are you doing here? I thought the Enterprise was in the Signet system for those trade negotiations. They are. I'm here to see a friend. Here at the Academy? Jamie asked doubtfully, eyeing the bartender's outlandish costume again. If she had a few hours and a bonding tool, she might be able to make something interesting out of Guinan's tunic and that hat, but right now all you could see was the round oval of her face. Guinan's pleasant expression never changed. You may know him. His name is Wesley Crusher. Jamie stopped herself from letting out a laugh of disbelief. Wesley Crusher, who didn't know Crusher, and the rest of the Nova Squadron, who'd tried and failed to perform a Colvord starburst. Yeah, he's in the class ahead of me, Jamie said diplomatically, leaving out the fact that the members of Nova Squadron were repeating a year. You don't sound very sympathetic, Guinan told her. Stung, Jamie protested. There's only so much you can sympathize, especially when people do stupid things. Besides, we're all getting punished because of Joshua Albert's death. The Academy is clamped down on everyone, like we can't be trusted because a few cadets made a mistake. Guinan shrugged slightly, undisturbed by Jamie's outburst. People make mistakes. It could have happened to anyone. It could happen to you. Excuse me, I know he's a friend of yours, but I wouldn't do anything like that. Guinan smiled, glancing up at the gleaming monorail overhead. You wouldn't? Jamie shifted, trying to ignore the bed of Hibernian tulips that seemed to be mocking her with their vibrant orange mouths. That's different. I'm trying to help my roommate. I can't just turn her into Academy security. Have you tried talking to her? Guinan asked. Of course, I try all the time, but she's an odd person. Elma grew up on Holt, in the habitat domes. Guinan nodded, as if she knew Holt well. You would value your privacy, too, if you lived with that many people under one roof. So you understand my problem, Jamie exclaimed in relief. She won't confide in me, and I'm afraid she's gotten into something over her head. Guinan turned her head slightly, once more considering the homing beacon in her hand. Jamie couldn't see the map, but she heard the tone that signaled that the beacon was now stationary. Listen, Jamie said urgently, taking a step closer to Guinan. What is Holt known for? It's mostly Bajoran resettlement camps, right? Well, why do you think that is? Because Bajorans are the only ones desperate enough to put up with those conditions, Guinan suggested. Well, that's true, Jamie conceded, but it's also in the perfect strategic position to serve as a resistance base. Guinan furrowed her brow. So what are you saying? She asked. I'm saying that I grew up here in San Francisco, and most of my mother's family is in Starfleet. My Aunt Danny is on a patrol right now near the border of occupied Bajor. I know the Federation can't risk their peace with the Cardassians by helping the Bajorans get back their homeworld, and I'm afraid Elma is trying to help the Bajoran resistance. She might get something from my aunt's messages, or Jamie glanced away, as if suddenly more interested in the lights on the Golden Gate Bridge than the homing beacon in Guinan's hand. There's lots of programs in my tricorder that could be used to compromise Starfleet systems. I see. For a moment, Jamie thought Guinan really understood. Then the bartender added, if you turn in your roommate, they'll find out that you've juiced up your tricorder. No, Jamie quickly denied. I've done nothing illegal, just unorthodox. If I thought there was a real danger, I would tell security, even if I got into trouble myself. See, I realize we're in this together. I'd just like to be able to confront her with everything. She looked longingly at the homing beacon. But it would help if I knew where she was going. She could be in a bar right now, and I'm making a big deal over nothing. Guinan slowly nodded. You're very good, Jamie Miranda. For some reason, Jamie didn't think that was intended as a compliment, but when Guinan handed back the homing device, she was too pleased to care. As she zoomed and focused the map, Jamie absently told Guinan, Crusher's lucky to have you for a friend. Finally, the correct section of the city clicked in, and the readout showed the location, the radio observatory. Guinan waited, clearly leaving it up to Jamie whether to tell her. She's at the dang observatory. That doesn't sound too dangerous, Guinan commented. No, but Jamie wasn't so certain, and while she owed Guinan for not turning her in for that crazy leap onto the monorail, she wasn't about to tell this stranger everything. Maybe I should talk to my quadmates about this. That's probably a good idea. Guinan kept staring at Jamie until the cadet started to squirm, feeling as if she had told Guinan everything. Maybe you should think about going into a different line of work, Jamie Miranda. Why do you say that? Jamie asked, startled. You aren't happy. Not happy, but I love Starfleet. I've waited all my life to join Starfleet. If you say so, Guinan demurred with a smile. Jamie hesitated, but Guinan didn't seem concerned about pressing her point. Uneasily, she said, thanks, as she left. At the end of the walk, she glanced back. Guinan was waiting in the soft pool of light around the monorail tower. Her hands were patiently folded together under her tunic, and she was apparently ready to stay as long as it took for Crusher to show up. Jamie knew she was being irritable, but she thought Crusher must not properly appreciate his friend to make her wait like that when she'd come so far. But Guinan was wrong about one thing. Her situation was completely different from Crusher's. The Nova Squadron had been acting like kids, playing a dangerous game to show off in front of everyone. Just look what it got them. Nick Locarno, the leader of Nova Squadron, expelled from Starfleet, and the others skulking around like pariahs, living, breathing examples for the other cadets of what not to do. But Jamie didn't need that lesson. She was doing this to help Elma, not to get glory or praise for her own efforts. No, she understood the Starfleet code, and she would keep on trying to help her roommate, even if Elma didn't want her help. Why couldn't she build another subverter or whatever it is you call it? Bobby Ray complained for the dozenth time. Then we could have walked in the front door like normal people. Jamie hardly had any breath left, and rather than argue with Bobby Ray, she concentrated on climbing the endless ladder to the top of the peaks that supported the dang parabolic dish. She did spare the time to glare at the furry orange humanoid clinging to the exterior maintenance ladder, the last one in line. Starsa, who was just below Jamie, shot back, What are you complaining about? You don't seem to be having a hard time. It was true. The large Rex was a natural athlete, specializing in security and hand-to-hand combat. But to hear Bobby Ray talk, he would rather curl up on a couch in the sun and sleep all day. Bobby Ray's roommate, Hammond Titus, gave Jamie an edgy grin. You could have warned us about this part when we were back in the quad. Is there any other surprise you have planned for us? I thought I told you, Jamie muttered, letting Starsa relay what she'd said to the others. Then she had to ignore their indignant denials. Okay, so she hadn't told them about this part, but how else did they think they were going to get inside the closed observatory? They knew the dish was anchored in a large natural depression in the mountains with a receiving station deep underground. They had a saying in Starfleet, you always remember your first quad. Jamie just wished her first quad was worth remembering. All the spark was in her fellow freshman cadets, and her opinion of them was falling fast under this test. It was only 2,000 feet up, for the horda's sake. As for the 4 older cadets in their quad, the ones they were supposed to look up to and emulate, that was an even sorrier lot. Not that she expected to have much fun around Therese, since he was a Vulcan, and she gave Elma allowances for being socially twisted by her upbringing on Holt, but she had expected more from Nev Rio, a former Bajoran Vedek, and Mal Enor, a newly joined Trill. The exotic possibilities in such roommates were endless, but Mal Enor had hardly spoken 4 words since the semester had begun, while Nev Rio readily admitted that he was a failure at everything he had tried. It was practically the first thing he said, and he tended to repeat it periodically. Rio was different, even among the few Bajoran cadets. He was older than everyone else, and it didn't help that his prematurely receding hairline added even more years to his appearance. With so many somber people around, Jamie sometimes felt like she was living in a geriatric ward instead of a quad. Jamie heaved herself onto the perimeter walkway, shifting over to allow the others up behind her. Bobby Ray took one look at the 5,000-foot parabolic dish with the opposite edge so far away that the regularly spaced lights disappeared in the darkness and said, "I'm having second thoughts about this." Titus crossed his arms. "Yeah, what makes you so sure Elma's helping the Bajoran resistance? She's got a class in radio astronomy this semester. Maybe she's doing lab work." "After midnight," Jamie countered. "And what about those Cardassian code files I found hidden in the back of her closet?" She hurried on before they could think to ask her what she was doing in the back of Elma's closet. What else is she doing with code files if she isn't decoding intercepted material and sending it to the resistance? "But this antenna only receives," Titus protested. "It doesn't transmit." "Ah, but it does transmit," Jamie said triumphantly. Pleased she'd taken a few minutes to flip through some of Elma's technical manuals on the large radio telescope. "It has to send coordinates to an orbital satellite to focus a telescopic electronic camera. That beam could be aimed at a communication satellite, relaying information that the antenna picked up. Or it could be used to tap into the orbital satellites, relaying the faster-than-light subspace radio communications from Federation starbases and starships throughout the Alpha Quadrant." Bobby Ray stood right on the edge of the dish, perfectly comfortable with the sheer drop. "I think we should quit while we're ahead." "And what if she is a spy?" Starsa asked. "Do we just march into Superintendent Brand's office and tell her we were right here, but didn't bother to go inside and see what Elma was doing?" Jamie silently applauded Starsa's spirit. Her species experienced a late puberty, so she was basically a 10-year-old, both physically and in the amount of impulsive daring she possessed. Unfortunately, the tall, slender girl was also suffering from severe acclimation sickness, so her slow metabolism had to be regulated and adjusted for Earth's pressure and gravity. Jamie had almost rejected Starsa for this mission on physical grounds, but now she was glad she had brought her along, especially when Starsa leaned out over the edge, shuddering at the drop but laughing at the vertigo it caused. The others shifted uneasily, clearly reconsidering their protests in the face of her courage. "Come on," Jamie ordered, taking advantage of their indecision. "We've got to climb out on the truss and take the anti-grav lift down." She gestured to the enormous cross lines high overhead, anchored to 3 towers around the edge of the dish. The lines met in the center, supporting a ring that allowed the feed to move, steering the beam that was reflected from the dish anywhere within 5 degrees of the zenith. "Up there?" Bobby Ray protested, looking at the lines overhead, then down into the black hole in the very center of the dish. "Looks dangerous." "The maintenance crew does it all the time," Jamie tossed off, heading toward the nearest tower. "More climbing," Titus grumbled, but he followed her. Starsa was kicking her heels over the edge. "Why is it so big? Our telescope at the Academy isn't nearly as big." "That's because it's a light wave telescope," Jamie explained. Radio waves go from a few millimeters to about 30 meters in wavelength. So the bigger the parabolic dish, the bigger waves it can catch. Oh, I knew that, Starsa started to say. Then she let out a piercing scream. Jamie wasn't sure what happened, but Starsa was suddenly plummeting down the nearly vertical wall of the dish, screaming like she was being burned alive. An orange blur shot down the white curving wall as Bobby Ray dived after her. While Starsa tumbled, bouncing against the reflective metal plates that lined the dish, Bobby Ray took an aerodynamically correct position as he zipped down head first. Jamie jammed her fist in her mouth as she hung over Titus, watching their descent. Bobby Ray's greater bulk caused him to rush past Starsa. No, that's not how it works. Anyway, they receded to tiny dots as they neared the flattened curve at the bottom of the dish, but they were still going fast, straight toward the gaping black hole in the center. Bobby Ray splayed his arms and legs, turning it into a dark gray X against the dish, spinning as he slowed. But Starsa was still tumbling out of control. Jamie didn't think Bobby Ray would have time, but he got his feet under him and made an impossible leap sideways. Even his tremendous strength wasn't enough, but at the last second, he snagged Starsa by the hair, stopping her right at the edge of the hole. Starsa's screams continued to echo out of the dish as Jamie frantically tapped her communicator, set for a special frequency just for this mission. Is she hurt? Is she hurt? Titus had put on his spotting loop and was peering through the misty air. He's got her. He's picking her up. Now he's shaking her. Starsa's screams abruptly stopped. Bobby Ray's lazy drawl came over their communicators. She's fine. He grabbed my hair, Starsa shrieked in the background as Bobby Ray released her. It's half pulled out, you big stupid cat! Jamie let out her breath, sitting down on the walkway with a jolt. Oh, that was close. Good thing she's got all that hair, Titus murmured, still watching them through the loop. Jamie was still shaking her head, thinking, now what? But she didn't want Titus to know how shaken she was. Bobby Ray was poking around at the edge of the hole, not bothering to respond to Starsa's complaints, which came clearly through the communicators. Hey, there's a lift down here, Bobby Ray said. Why don't you slide down and join us? What? Jamie exclaimed. Do you think we're insane? Just make sure you catch me, Titus sang out. Yee-haw! Like that, he leaped over the side of the dish, laughing as he whizzed down feet first. Jamie watched him quickly dwindle, falling nearly 2,000 feet, but this time Bobby Ray jogged over to position himself in Titus's path, leaving plenty of space between him and the hole. As the big Rex grabbed hold of the cadet, Titus's momentum carried them spinning the last few meters. Starsa tried to help by getting between them and the hole, but she nearly got knocked in. They were all jabbering at once, so that Jamie couldn't tell what was happening down there, but everyone seemed to be all right. She didn't need a spotting loop to tell when all three faces expectantly turned up in their direction. She almost called for them to wait for her while she took the truss lift down like a normal human being, but it would take forever for her to climb all the way up the tower and walk to the middle of the truss. Their presence must have already been recorded by the deformation of the enormous dish, supported by sensitive anti-grav nodes, and surely there was an alarm going off somewhere that the dish needed adjustment. Jamie swung her legs over the side. For a moment she hung there, facing a near-vertical drop, her instincts crying, danger! But a good officer knew how to roll with the punches. Ex astra scientia! Jamie cried out as she jumped off the edge. The first part was the worst, when it felt like she was actually falling with hardly any contact between her and the wall. Then the drag of the slope caught her, redirecting her and making it feel like she was going even faster and out of control. Instinctively, her hands tried to grab hold of the smooth surface, and she flipped over on her stomach. All she could see was the sharp, wide edge of the dish far overhead, cutting into the night sky. Then something caught her ankle and jerked her in a big circle. Jamie cried out as her leg was practically pulled from her hip joint. When she was convinced she was fully stopped, she checked to make sure the hole was safely far away. Then she finally rolled into a sitting position. Did you have to pull so hard? Did you have to pull so hard? She asked Bobby Ray, digging into her pocket for the portable biogenerator that came in standard cadet first aid kits. Between the shoulder injury from the monorail and now this, She was beginning to realize why doctors were routinely assigned to away teams. Bobby Ray showed his teeth, his way of laughing. Kvetch, kvetch, kvetch. Why doesn't anyone ever thank me? Starsa was rubbing her head, mussing her thick curly ponytail as she glared at the Rex. Can I have that when you're done? She asked Jamie. Jamie handed it over and went to the access port. The tertiary mirror was positioned inside and down a few meters on its own steerable truss. A catwalk ran along the inner edge, with an anti-grav lift right next to the cable that carried the amplified radio signal down into the receiving station. Well, we're halfway there, Jamie said, trying to think positively. Let's get going. Mal Enor woke from a deep sleep as the beeping got louder and more insistent. For a moment, the tonal quality reminded her of the wake-up chime at the Symbiosis Institute, and she thought she was back on Trill, awaiting notification that a symbiont had been selected for her. As she struggled to sit up, still mostly asleep, she realized she was in the Academy Quad. The beeping was a sensor on Starsa's pulmonary support unit and physiostimulator pack, warning that her activity was exceeding recommended limits. In the 4 weeks Mal Enor had known Starsa, the girl had exceeded her recommended physical limits 31 times. The beeping was so routine that Mal had become accustomed to it and ignored it, knowing that the relay would buzz uncomfortably on Starsa's implant, warning her to slow down. But when she glanced at the time, she realized that Therese was still out, giving a workshop on extended meditation techniques. Usually Starsa's Vulcan roommate took it upon himself to monitor Starsa's habits and scold her when she was thoughtless. Mal couldn't understand what could be causing a medical alert at this time of night, when Starsa was usually in bed asleep. She quickly got up, noticing that Nevrio was still sleeping soundly in his bed, his mouth open and his face pressed against a pillow, with the blanket twisted impossibly around his body. One bare foot jutted over the edge. He didn't even shift as the beeping escalated. Mal Enor ran the few steps down the circular hallway and knocked on Starsa's door. She could hear the beeping more loudly, and she knocked more insistently. When there was no answer, she went inside, but both the beds were empty, and a quick check in the refresher reassured her that Starsa wasn't lying on the floor in distress. With a sinking feeling, Mal checked the other 2 rooms in their quad and found both empty. All 4 of the first-year cadets were probably together. They had seemed to bond fairly quickly. But Elma's absence surprised her. Elma was a year ahead of Mal, but until they were assigned to the same quad, she had never seen the Holt woman, and Mal made it a point to notice everything. As the first host for the Enor symbiont, it was her duty to provide a foundation of experiences, as well as a wide-ranging understanding of the numerous alien species that inhabited the Alpha Quadrant. But Elma was a non-existent presence in the quad, and Mal was at a loss as to why she would be gone so late. She had never seen a friend of hers come to the quad. Returning to Starsa's room, Mal glanced around, but Starsa's pulmonary support unit and physiostimulator pack were not immediately identifiable among the wreckage on the girl's side of the partition. The room looked schizophrenic, with the Vulcan half painfully neat and bare, while Starsa had almost covered her walls with pictures and holoscreens that ran loops of her favorite shows and family members performing odd customs. Mal had thought it was bad living with Nevrio, but at least the former Vedic maintained order on his side of their room. It was his verbal messiness that wore on her. He would ramble on cheerfully for hours while she tried to concentrate on her studies, but he was so awkwardly eager to please that she never censored him, resolving that the experience must be good for her symbiont in some way. Mal tapped the wall comm. Computer, location of Cadet Starsa Tarn. Cadet Tarn is not on Academy grounds. Mal could hardly think of the implications of that, as a maddening beeping chose that moment to escalate to its highest level. What are you doing? Nevrio suddenly asked behind her. Mal Enor started, feeling guilty in spite of herself. I'm looking for Starsa. Rio sleepily rubbed his face. glancing from the empty beds to Malinor. Starsa noted the way even his pajamas bunched in odd places, just like his computer-fitted cadet uniform somehow never seemed to hang right. He was wincing at the sound of the medical alarm. "Did the first-year cadets say what they were doing tonight?" She had to raise her voice. "I don't know." His mouth hung open as he thought about it. "I don't remember anything." The door whirred electronically and swung open. Malinor felt a leap of relief, but it was Therese, not Starsa. The Vulcan pulled back in surprise to see them. "Hi," Nevrio said innocently. Therese tightened his lips, vexed at his slight display of emotion. "What are you two doing in my room?" Malinor gestured, but he had already noted the sound of the physiostimulator pack. "Where is Starsa?" "We don't know," Rio said. "The others are gone too." Therese lifted one brow. "Everyone?" "Yeah." "Did you report this?" Therese asked, turning to the comm. Maul crossed her arms defensively. "We were just about to." Therese pressed the emergency sequence. "Then we shall delay no longer." At the Deng Observatory, the 4 cadets stood on the circular platform of the anti-grav lift as it gently descended into the receiving station. Bobby Ray and Starsa gazed over the side, but Jamie never wanted to see another drop like that. From the maintenance tubes at the base of the well, it wasn't far to reach the computer rooms. In the darkened, vaulted chambers, the radio signals were displayed on screens in colored patterns, moving across the recording graphs. Numerous digital sequencers flashed the numbers of incoming data streams. This was the part Jamie had been waiting for, sneaking up on Elma and catching her red-handed. Her tricorder was out, recording the activity in the room. It indicated there was a human female on the opposite side. Jamie tried to stay in the lead, but her team had other ideas. They fanned out among the terminals, making much more noise than she had anticipated. "Psst!" she hissed at them, trying to get them to fall into position. But Titus didn't even glance her way, trying to take the lead as always, while Starsa was apparently mesmerized by the shifting abstract images on a large, colorful display. Bobby Ray had disappeared. Jamie forged on, clenching her teeth, but determined to make it work out in spite of her team. Suddenly the lights came on, and Elma stepped onto an elevated platform. The cadets froze, absurdly caught in their stocking positions. But Elma was clutching the rail, her knuckles white, as her gaze shifted desperately from one to the other, as if she was one who was caught. "What are you doing here?" Titus demanded, pointing an accusing finger up at Elma. "I was working." Bobby Ray hitched one leg over a console, leaning casually back against the monitor. "Most people work when the observatory is open." "Yeah," Titus said, inching closer to her. "What are you doing that you have to sneak in here at night?" Elma swallowed, unable to let go of the rail. "Might as well tell us," Bobby Ray advised her, examining a long, curved nail before chewing gently on it to smooth out a snag. "Or would you rather tell security?" "Stop it," Jamie ordered, shoving Titus out of the way so she could look up at Elma. "We're not here to make trouble for you. We want to help." Before she could coax Elma into revealing the truth, they were rudely interrupted by the arrival of the observatory personnel. Doors banged open on all sides of the computer room, and at least 10 technicians and scientists poured into the control room in various states of undress, rushing to the various monitors. "What happened to the dish?" one of them blurted out, hanging onto the keypad as he tried to make sense of the data. "There couldn't have been an earthquake." "Who are you?" another one demanded, torn between the distressing numbers on their equipment and the strangers in the control room. Exclamations rang out over lost data and destroyed projects. Jamie's quad mates were inadvertently herded closer together by the frantic technicians. Then one older scientist pulled her robe tighter around herself, twisting up the side of her mouth as she realized what they were dealing with. "Cadets," she snarled, as if that one word said it all. The cadets were at attention, in a line, in front of Superintendent Admiral Brand's desk. Jamie noted that the room was perfectly proportioned to allow all 8 members of a quad to stand shoulder to shoulder. The fact that this was probably a common occurrence didn't make her feel any better. Admiral Brand sat with her back to the windows where the dawn's first rays tinted the sky, casting her face into shadow. Only her silver-white hair caught the light, swept high off her forehead, while her hands were calmly folded on her desk. Then I saw the alarm from the subsidiary arrays, Alma was explaining, so I knew something was occluding the focus. From the variance of the interference fringes, it had to be a deformation of the main dish. I'd seen something like it before when the plates were being cleaned, so I was afraid the staff was working the night shift. I hid until my quad mates showed up. Brand turned to the 3 other senior cadets. Cadet First Class Therese, when was the first time you knew something was happening? When I returned to my room and saw that Cadet Starsa Terran's medical relay was on alert, Therese replied, the epitome of attention. I signaled the Academy medical unit immediately. Jamie couldn't help rolling her eyes. Of course Therese had ratted on them. Brand noticed and turned her attention to Jamie. You were fortunate the observatory personnel handed you over to Academy security without pressing charges of trespassing. However, they may still claim compensatory damages for the loss of data and injury to the parabolic dish. That was my fault, Starsa freely admitted. I slipped off the walkway and slid down the side. Cadet Jefferson jumped over to save me. She gave the tall Rex a surprisingly sweet smile. Bobby Ray gave her a deadpan look, obviously remembering her indignant wailing. Admiral Brand wasn't distracted. That doesn't explain why you were attempting to break into the observatory in the first place. The other 3 cadets looked at Jamie, deferring responsibility to her. Jamie haltingly explained the sequence of events from the first few nights when Elma had taken her tricorder to her realization that she was going into the dang observatory after it was closed. She left out the part about falling off the monorail, figuring it would only confuse things. Brand turned back to Elma. Why did you take Cadet Miranda's tricorder? Because it has a security override I could use to get inside the observatory. Elma kept her head down, her voice low. It was hard to hear her. I had to. I couldn't work during the regular lab hours. All those cadets talking and moving around. I can't concentrate, so I've been doing my summaries when everyone's gone. Oh, we thought you were a Bajoran resistance fighter, Starsa said artlessly. What did you think? Admiral Brand asked, her voice strained with incredulity. Jamie, Cadet Starsa quickly corrected herself. Cadet Miranda said Elma was tapping communiques with the telescope and relaying them to the resistance fighters. Jamie wanted to kick Starsa, but it was too late. Because she's from Holt, and I thought it seemed to make sense at the time why she was being so secretive. Elma actually raised her head, blinking rapidly as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing. All of Jamie's fantasy scenarios crumpled under Elma's blank, uncomprehending stare. Therese sniffed in disdain. You should have informed the senior cadets in your quad. Well, since you bring it up, I tried, Jamie shot back. Remember when I came into your room last week? But you wouldn't even listen when I told you it was about Elma. You said she had seniority since she was a last-year cadet, and that I had to work my problems out with her. That's enough, Brand ordered. The cadets immediately stiffened, facing the window again. I believe this incident reflects a failure of your entire quad. You are responsible for each other, and I hope that before the end of the year, you will have learned that. She paused, letting her words sink in. A formal reprimand will be placed in each of your academic records, and you are all hereby placed on probation for 60 days. Jamie flushed at the sentence. Her family was going to have a fit when they heard she was already in serious trouble after barely arriving at the academy. But the worst was yet to come, as Brand walked around her desk to stand directly in front of Jamie. Cadet Miranda, I expected more from you. Henceforth, you will refrain from letting your fancies interfere with your duty to Starfleet. If you do detect a spy in our midst, we would all be better served if you alert your commanding officer. Yes, sir, Jamie agreed. It won't happen again. No, it won't, Elma suddenly agreed. The cadet broke rank, stepping forward. Superintendent Brand, I would like to resign my commission to the Academy. No, Jamie blurted out. Brand waved a hand at Jamie, silencing her. What is your reason? I'm not suited to Starfleet. I can't stand being around people who don't act right. Elma stopped herself. I mean, act like we do on Holt. I belong there, and I've been delaying the inevitable by sneaking around, trying to avoid everyone. Brand considered her for a moment. Then her expression softened as she gently clasped Elma's shoulder. I've been impressed with your persistence, and I had hoped you would become accustomed to the different culture. Elma stiffly shook her head, unable to speak. Brand nodded. Very well. Remain here, cadet. The rest of you are dismissed. You'll be notified if the Deng Observatory pursues compensation. The others practically ran out of the superintendent's office, but Jamie dragged her feet. She would have protested again, but Brand silently shook her head and motioned to the door. Jamie's last look at Elma caught the older cadet staring down at her fingers, twisting them together painfully, unable to return Brand's reassuring smile. All day, Jamie kept thinking about the way Elma always twined her fingers together, pulling and bending them as if to distract herself from some outer torment. Why hadn't she been able to see what was happening? When Jamie returned to the quad from her classes, Elma's half of the room was empty. The cabinets were cracked open, and the desk under the other square window had been cleared off. Jamie sat down on the bare mattress, feeling like she should be shot. What have I done? She moaned out loud. This is awful. What can I do? The door slowly swung open, and Nev Rio stuck his head cautiously around. Is there something wrong? With tears starting to form in her eyes, Jamie wordlessly held out her arms to the empty room. She's gone? Even in her sorrow, Jamie was exasperated. I'm surprised he didn't expel me, too. But Elma quit. She didn't get expelled. I'm talking about Locarno. Jamie buried her head in her hands, thinking of the last self-styled hero who had hit the academy. Who was she to think she could save the universe, much less one frightened woman from Holt? Nick Locarno? Nev Rio's brow creased in confusion, making him look even older. You mean a leader of Nova Squadron? Who else? Jamie sighed, letting her hands fall into her lap. I don't expect you to understand, but I haven't been doing as well in my classes as everyone seems to expect. I thought this was a way I could prove myself. But you're getting B's, Jamie. That's not failure. Believe me, I know what it means to fail. I know. You're such a terrible Vedic. You've told everyone that. Abashed, Rio bent his head. I admire what Elma did. It's hard to make a big change, to give up everything you've planned on. I bet that's why she didn't say goodbye to us. Because she was ashamed, Jamie agreed. Surprisingly, Rio shook his head. No, because we didn't matter anymore. She knew this part of her life was over, so she could walk away. That's pretty heartless, Jamie protested. She's been here almost 4 years. She was practically ready to graduate. Nev Rio shrugged. You can only struggle for so long. If something's not working, then you have to try something else. He glanced shyly up at her. You know, I was in the Bajoran resistance. You? Jamie exclaimed. Nev Rio nodded, unhurt by her obvious shock. You were? She asked, unable to stop herself from looking harder at his wrinkled Bajoran nose. Really? I was very young and wanted to help like everyone else, but I don't like to fight. I can't even hold a disruptor rifle, much less point it at anyone, he confessed. So I thought that meant I should be a Vedic. Nonviolent resistance, but you know the rest. That wasn't right for me either. I'm better suited to geological studies. Jamie stared at his honest, open face. I didn't know you fought Cardassians. Even when Rio grinned, he looked vaguely worried. Everything works out the way it's supposed to, Jamie. Even Nick Locarno got what he wanted. You don't mean he wanted to be expelled? No, not exactly, but he wanted everyone to remember him. So he tried to take a shortcut, and now no one will ever forget him. Yeah, you'd think he was still around as much as everyone whispers his name when something goes wrong, Jamie agreed ruefully. That's good, because that means Joshua Albert didn't die for nothing. Everything's tightened up, ship-shape. It should be. Too many people were killed fighting the Borg last year. We're the only ones who can take their place, even if we aren't perfect. Right, Jamie agreed, straightening her shoulders. Maybe she wasn't as good at engineering as she should be, but she could only keep trying. Besides, she never claimed she was as brilliant as her mother or her older sister. I guess you're saying I'll have to do it the hard way, right? I never found any other way, Nevrio earnestly assured her.